Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name's Dave March. I'm the CEO of Exergy Energy. Joining me today is Pat Smith. Wave, Pat, whatever. A couple of housekeeping measures first. This, as you know, is being recorded. Also, we have muted everyone and turned off everybody's video. So we appreciate questions. If you've got questions, please use the chat. The chat will be viewable by everybody. So, be kind and things like that as well. Appreciate it. So Pat, thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise, literally, to this life-saving issue. I just, again, want to remind everybody it's a question and answer forum. So please, this is only 30 minutes. We're going to get moved through here pretty quickly. If you've got a question for Pat, just type it into the chat. We have a monitor. It's going to watch the chat and make sure we get your questions. By way of quick introduction, this interview is sponsored by Exergy Energy. We are a concierge utility for organizations that need to keep running if the grid goes down. So we'll make you green, we'll make you resilient, and we'll save you money. And because we are buyers, managers, and maintainers of backup generators, it's an area of great interest to us. So I was going through some regulations and documentation the other day on health safety systems specifically, and came across Pat and the concerns and questions around biodiesel in backup generators. So joining us today is Pat Smith, founder and president of Octane Systems and a renowned expert on fuel quality, fuel systems, and again, most important for today, biodiesel blends. So Pat, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us today. So I'm going to start with my first question, and I'm going to make it a big 30,000-foot one there. So Pat, what's up with biodiesel and why are backup generators most at risk?
Thank you very much, Dave. We will move along pretty quickly. So first and foremost, we need more biodiesel use. It provides great environmental benefits, but there's a recently recognized negative impact on biodiesel that needs to be addressed, and it's not been addressed to this date. So biodiesel blends help initiate corrosion in all the applications that are involved with it. But the implications are worse the longer the fuel sits, such as in backup generator storage. So biodiesel is blended with regular diesel. A biodiesel molecule and diesel molecule are very similar and also have similar molecular weight. So biodiesel will remain mixed within the diesel. Most diesel equipment can use some biodiesel without modification.
So I have a question, Pat. So
yes.
You said that it will remain mixed. Now, biodiesel is kind of a polar molecule and diesel is an aliphatic, essentially. Do they separate over time or do they stay immersed together?
They basically stay immersed because biodiesel is a polar molecule. It needs another polar molecule to really start to react. And the issue with that is that water is also a polar molecule. So biodiesel will absorb 15 to 25 times more water than pure diesel will. And it also locks the water away. So first of all, it can't be detected using traditional water detection techniques. And it can't be removed using traditional filters.
So the water that's entrained in the diesel mixture, you said can't be detected and can't be removed?
Correct, and we're just going to go into that for this next section. Many polar biodiesel molecules will surround a water droplet. The polar head attaches to the water, the tail points out into the diesel. And in fact, I believe we have one picture. If you could throw that up there, it'll probably help.
Yeah, so everybody bear with me for a second while I share some screens, here.
So this, as the biodiesel surrounds a water molecule, it forms something called a micelle. So this is key to what's happening with diesel today. So what you don't see in the middle of that is the water droplet. So that's been removed to show how the biodiesel molecules the head of it, which is polar, attaches to the polar water droplet. Notice the tails, which are non-polar, they stick out into the diesel. So biodiesel encapsulates the water. Hence, you cannot detect it using normal detection methods like water paste. And furthermore, traditional filters need to touch the water to remove it. They can't touch the water because it's encapsulated in biodiesel. Thank you for the picture there.
In fact, that's pretty bizarre. So literally the biodiesel surrounds the water, and I'm going to say hides it. Is that sort of accurate?
Well, traditional techniques for sensing water, there's no water bottom. So if you go to a diesel tank, people start to look for water bottoms, but there's no water bottom because the micelle does sink to the water, a bottom, because the water is heavier than diesel, but it can't touch other water molecules. So these micelles start to pile up into layers, and the layers can be as much as 6 inches thick.
Okay, now the micelle itself is not a biologically active thing, right? It's just a chemical surrounding, essentially, again, and hiding the water. Is that right?
Correct. It's biodiesel molecules surrounding water droplet and stopping it. Any surfactant will do it, by the way. Biodiesel is a surfactant, and most blends are a minimum 4%, so that's what gets attracted to the water initially. Key part to this is that microbial growth, whereas traditionally was a very thin layer on the bottom of the diesel tank, can now expand into the 6 inches of micelle layer. So there's a great amount of growth volume for the microbes. Microbes make acids, acids corrode, gensets and tanks.
Okay,
So
well, how does the bacteria and the microbes literally get into the diesel?
They're just there.
They're just there?
Yeah, they're in the air, they're in the soil, they are just there.
And the diesel doesn't kill them or anything, or why? What do they like about diesel?
They eat diesel. So in the past, before biodiesel, there'd be a layer of water on the bottom. There'd be a very thin layer of microbes between the water and the diesel because it needs water and needs food. That layer was described as about the thickness of a sheet of paper. If we go to buy paper for our printers we have at home, 1 inch of paper is one bundle is about 200 sheets of paper. So each inch is about 200 times the growth volume for microbes. So it's a massive increase in growth volume. So once you've got acidified fuel and you have filters that can't remove the micelles, those micelles are being sent into the generator. So your risk of backup generator failure is dramatically increased.
We have a question from the audience, from Aaron P., who asked, what are the most easy ways to use water detection methods in the field?
So we're going to cover that off in about 2 or 3 minutes. So if we could hold that till that time, that would be great.
Pat, is it the micelle itself that is causing the problems with the diesel, with the generator and plugging and things like that? Or what's happening? What's really the action that's going on?
It's the microbes. The microbes eat the micelles. So the biodiesel is food and it has water with it right there. So that's where it can move through the whole 6 inches of micelles and eat it and grow and produce acids.
So if the biodiesel wasn't there, the water would just sit at the bottom?
It would, as for a century, basically diesel was our go-to backup fuel because the water would go to the bottom and all you had to do was basic housekeeping, drain the water out and you're basically good. But that's no longer the case.
And now because of the micelle, it floats on top of that water. And
no, the micelle is
encapsulated
water by biodiesel, but it does settle to the bottom, but makes a layer up to 6 inches thick.
And then the microbes then go eat the micelle.
Correct.
And then in that metabolism, they're excreting acids, I think.
That is correct. Right? If we think of alcohol, we have microbes that eat sugars and yeast and make alcohol. These guys make acids.
Now, what is actually causing the problem with the generators? Is it the micelles? Is it the bacteria? Is it
It's the acidic. So the key part is the acidification, because the injectors on backup generators, they're micron sized. So you test a generator once a month or so for about an hour. You get acidified fuel sitting on the injector that corrodes the tips and the needles. So that affects all sorts of parameters in the generator. The fuel spray, which is key for efficiency, gets disrupted. If you lose a single, I've got a cat in the background. If you lose a single injector, the system will shut down. But each injector will also give away varying power. And if you get too much of a power sway between the 6 or 8 injectors, the system will shut down.
Okay, help me to understand why this isn't a more pervasive problem. I mean, I go to the gas station, and the diesel there is all biodiesel. Trucks have got to be running biodiesel. Cars have got to be running biodiesel. Why am I not driving down the highway and seeing trucks and cars on the side of the road, broken down? Why are we focused here on backup generators?
Well, because it affects the most effect is where the diesel sits. So in a generator, the fuel sits in that generator tank effectively forever. They're supposed to change it out every once in a while. They never knew, they just top it up. So you'll have continually increasing corrosion in the tank and hence into the injectors. For a gas station, those tanks turn over quickly. So if you have dry diesel supplied to the gas station, you shouldn't really have much of a corrosion problem, hence the trucks won't have a corrosion problem. But there's a concern that in the big terminal storage tanks that supply the gas stations, they're absorbing a lot of water and having corrosion in them, which is then could be delivered to the gas stations. Now, another new area that's come up is home heating storage tanks. These are generally very small, 275 gallon average, very thin walled, and there's been a major rise in failure rates on those.
If I have a backup generator and I want to have it refueled and things like that, and I just call up my fuel delivery folks and things like that and say, hey, I need you to fuel up my diesel. Are they going to sort of look ahead and say, oh, it's a backup generator, I'm not going to give you a biodiesel blend? I'm just trying to understand what really happens out there.
Biodiesel has been basically mandated in most jurisdictions, and those that it's not, there are great financial subsidies to implement biodiesel for all the great environmental reasons. So the odds of you not getting biodiesel, I would say, would be very, very low.
Let me put you on the spot here.
Fire away.
Let's do a little history lesson. And of course, I don't know anything about history.
Oh, I just lost your...
So the lesson's going to come from you. You okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. How long have we been using biodiesel? And if I am an owner of a backup generator and I really don't know where my diesel came from, how long does it take until I start having problems or something like that?
Fair ball. Again, for a century until 2006, diesel was effectively fine. 2006, they started to implement biodiesel as an additive. In 2007, they first started to know corrosion issues. Since then, there's been other reports. The United States Air Force did a study in 2020, and where they looked at B20 storage for a year, and they had significant corrosion. In fact, one tank had to be pulled out after 9 months. The CRC 2021 report was just out, which actually defined micelles as well. So that's one of the great findings they had. Showed corrosion reaching its highest peak of the 12-week study, week 6. So it does take some time to start, but then it goes, continues to go. So effectively right now, you'll be getting corrosion in any diesel that has a biodiesel content.
What's the prescribed? A question, Dave, about water analysis and things like that?
Sure. The question was, what is the most easy to use water detection method in the field?
Okay, so there's three things you need to look for in your tank if you're concerned about corrosion. For water, you have to use something called a Carl-Fisher titration. Short form is a KF, and it's an ASTM 6304. What a Carl-Fisher does, it takes your fuel sample, it runs a very low level electrical charge to it, breaks apart the micelles, so you can now register the water. I've done tanks that had 30,000 parts per million water on the bottom in micelles. No freestanding water, but 30,000 parts per million. It was stunning. A second test you should do in general is to find out how acidified your fuel is. And there's a TAN test, a total acid number. It's ASTM delta, D as in Delta, 664. Now the TAN numbers have recently dropped from 0.08 down to 0.05, showing the concern that the industry has in corrosion. And the final quick test you can do is the standard particulate test, ISO 4406, because it'll pick up microbial growth as particulate as well. These are three inexpensive tests. They should be less than $100, and they will give you a good snapshot of what your tank is like.
We had a follow-up question related to that. What is the acceptable ppm range?
So I look at gensets. All the generator warranties are 200 parts per million or less.
Of water?
Of water. So it's very low, but also if you pull out the warranty document, they have pages describing biodiesel. Then they have very onerous requirements to keep the biodiesel within spec. And they all have a statement stating, if you don't follow our recommendations, your warranty is void. So basically, generator manufacturers have no liability for damage to their gensets if they're using biodiesel and you're not following these limits.
So let's say I get the tests done, Pat, and it comes back and it's not too bad. All right, let's say it's within acceptable range, but my diesel generator has been in place for the past 10 years. So I may have had multiple fills, unfills, et cetera, et cetera. So even though I may pass that, I still may have now a hidden and lingering problem. Is that right?
Correct. So there's a simple solution for this. We've just gone through all the gloom and doom.
I was going to say, yes, it's kind
yeah,
of
I know.
depressing.
But there's a standards-based solution. The filtration test for diesel is SEA J1488. They updated that to apply to biodiesel. So effectively, if you have a J1488 filtration system that meets the new standard, it removes micelles. So you can then keep your water content below 200 parts per million. I have numerous J1488 installations at data centers across Canada and down the States, and the water is always below 100 parts per million. The TAN is kept under control because the microbes don't have enough water to grow. So it's a key factor, a simple installation of J1488 filtration. The US Air Force were going to go to B40. So that would have been a huge boon to the biodiesel industry. They saw issues, they did their B20 test. I personally doubt if they're going to go even B20. Whereas if they would have had J1488 filtration on these tanks, there would be no issue.
Now, what's the location of that filter? That's got to be from incoming material, not between the tank and the generator, I would assume.
So these filters are standalone. You're absolutely right. All they do is filter the tank. They don't use the same piping as the generator. You never want to fight the genset for fuel. but it's a bolt-on, standalone filtration system. Biodiesel also absorbs water very quickly. It can hit saturation within a day. So the recommendation filtration period is multiple times a week.
So this is literally recirculating the diesel through the filtration system, not necessarily continuously, but several times a week to take care of that. Is that
to
my
remove the
understanding?
micelles, break the micelles apart, remove the water, and give dry filter fuel back. I've tested fuel coming out of the filters, 14 parts per million. Like, it's incredibly dry.
Wow.
We have another question here. Do you recommend periodic biocide treatments to keep microbes at bay?
You certainly can use biocides, but it needs to be in conjunction with getting rid of the water. So you can kill the microbes. If microbes are everywhere, they'll start to grow again. So a combination of biocides and drying the fuel will keep your system okay.
So I have two questions. So this weekend I was bored, so I read the 2016 version of the NFPA 110 regulations, and it mentions biodiesel in the sense that it recommends you not or do not use biodiesel, but it didn't say anything about any standards for testing or filtration or anything else. Have we not done the job that we need to do with respect to regulations?
So the corrosion issue is just being recognized now. The Patel report came out 2000 and I forget the exact date. The EPA report, which is sort of the bellwether report, came out in 2016. And now the CRC report came out last year. By the way, for the EPA report, I read the draft report 2015 and they're talking water bottom still. So I wrote an email. So short version, I wrote an email to EPA that they need to look at the effect of biodiesel. We had a conference call with their engineers and they built the concept of entrained water into the report. So it's nice to know I've had an effect on the education of the marketplace, but it's still going much too slowly. And we're going to get a lot more corrosion, a lot more failures coming up. It's cumulative, these corrosion issues.
So if I sort of stand back and think about what you've said, is I really can't control the diesel that I'm getting delivered, right? I don't know whether it's blended or not.
It is blended. So I will say, I'm going to say it is blended. Yeah.
Okay. So in the vast majority of the case, it's going to be blended. What do you recommend for people who have diesel generators? If one were to call you up and say, Pat, I've got a diesel generator. I don't have a filtration system on. I don't know if that's at all accurate, but I don't have one. What should I do? What is your recommendation for folks?
So to control corrosion, there's two ways to handle diesel corrosion. The first is put on J148 filtration. That will stop it. The second is move away from diesel. Like you can now buy emergency backup generators running on natural gas and propane. So that bypasses the whole diesel corrosion issue, period.
Let's say I've had diesel generator installed for quite some time. I put in the filtration system and things like that. Moving forward, I should be okay. But will the corrosion stop? Or is corrosion just slowed down and I'm eventually going to end up with an issue?
So one key part of this is that if you've got acidified fuel, you can then put a J1488 filtration system that will remove the micelles and stop the production or dramatically control the production of the acids from microbes because you're removing the water. But the fuel itself will still be acidified. So you then are looking at the case of replacing all the fuel. And people are typically not doing that. So there will be continued corrosion. If you have a brand new tank and generator and you're going J14 right off the bat, as a number of my clients are, there's never an issue.
All right, I'm going to really put you on the spot, Pat. Okay.
Fire away. Go.
I've got a generator, got a tank, don't have a filtration system on it. Let's just say it's brand new for the purpose of this analysis. How long would it take until I actually notice or have a failure?
So the
I know
corrosion.
that's a really tough one, Pat. I'm
Well, no,
sorry.
but if you look at all the studies, corrosion is noticeable within a year.
Wow.
So it's
Okay.
within a year. And then as the levels of corrosion will increase, if you want linearly, and probably more than that, because you're going to get more microbes, more acids. So you will start to get injector failure issues. And by the way, the manufacturers of the gensets, whenever you call in for a warranty repair now, they're asking for a fuel sample. And if your fuel's not up to spec, you're not covered by warranty.
Wow. I read something, and it may have been on your website, Pat, about like biofilms. Can this actually lead to biofilms in my tank?
Absolutely. So biofilms are nothing but layers upon layers of microbes. And they tend to sit very close to the surfaces, and they concentrate the corrosion below them. So that's where you get the major threat on the tank leakages. The other problem with biofilms is they're thick. And if they break up during an emergency, you've got strips of, one guy described it as the feel of boiled pig skin. That will plug pipes, that will plug filters. So it's a physical stoppage of your fuel going to your generator.
If someone was concerned whether or not they've had sufficient damage, I say to be concerned or so. So we talked about the testing of the fuel. Is there anything that the generator manufacturer, the maintenance people or something can do to determine whether or not they've already suffered damage, like, I'm going to say erosion of the injector diameters or anything like that?
So I'm sure they have diagnostics on their systems, which I'm not familiar with. But the operators of these things will start to see drops in power, variability in power, those various things.
Understand. We have about 2 minutes left. So if anybody wants to ask a question, would really, let's do it now. We're going to try and keep this to 30 minutes. Pat, thanks so much. What didn't I ask that I should have asked you regarding this subject?
Part of my personal concern is that it's been such a slow uptake within the diesel industry itself on corrosion. J1488 is a standard. It addresses biodiesel, yet very few experts have even looked at it. And I'm puzzled by that. I'm very puzzled. And I think it's put it bluntly, a disaster waiting to happen. I look at hospitals, I look at the OEMs, the CEOs of these major organizations who have relied on the diesel industry for advice. Nothing's making it up to them that they've got this big issue. And they're the ones who are going to wear it if a hospital goes down and somebody dies. If you have a crisis and your water filtration plant stops, so you can't provide water to the public for the 2 weeks that the hurricane's going through. Like, these are issues of life and death that are not being addressed by the diesel industry. And I'm puzzled by that.
I was going to say, you can see my gray hair. My memory isn't all that great. And you said a lot of, ASTM this and this number and this number. So just let everybody know, thank you for attending. We will send out sort of a paper from Pat on what are the test standards and things that you should do so that you don't have to try and listen to this again and try and pick up those numbers. I appreciate that. As Pat had mentioned, biodiesel is important. It's important to the country in helping to reduce, climate change and things like that with respect to transportation, certainly. If you got backup generators, you have to be doubly cautious. So obviously filtration becomes incredibly important. We recommend, and Pat recommends, we got to go out, let's get that fuel tested, make sure that we're okay and we're in good shape. If you're at the point where your diesel generator is, getting long in the tooth, getting expensive to maintain, talk to us at Exergy Energy. We'll replace it for you with a natural gas generator, which is a lot cleaner and less expensive to operate, doesn't have these issues and we can do it at no cost to you as well. Pat, any last parting questions, comments, or guidance that you can provide?
Well, just you covered it off well. Biodiesel is very important, and we want to have the uptake of biodiesel increased. So my request would be to the biodiesel manufacturers to also start to look at this and make their own judgment calls on it. But we need more direction from the people who make biodiesel as well.
Now, I apologize, we're going over for a minute, but something just came to mind, Pat. There's a thing out there also called renewable diesel, which is different, I think, than biodiesel.
Correct.
Can you help us understand that, please?
Renewable diesel is diesel from same plant and animal material, but has the exact same chemical characteristics as regular diesel. So it's not biodiesel, it's effectively diesel.
So rather than biodiesel with the oxygen in it from the transesterification process, this is literally oils and things that go to a refinery and get hydrogenated into diesel, not biodiesel.
Correct.
So it doesn't have those issues, I take it.
I'm not an expert on that, but
Okay.
From what I've read about, because I've had that question a number of times, it's taking plant material, et cetera. Instead of making biodiesel, it's renewable diesel. The issue they're running into now is much more expensive to make.
We had a question, and this I think is more, is gas generators applicability for standby power would be okay, but for life safety, isn't there a restriction here? That would be tough to get around for life safety emergency. I think the biggest one there's really two. The biggest one is speed. So under a life safety, under NFPA 110, and I think that was Frank, that's a 10-second start. The newest gas generators can do that. So they can in fact be used in fast start for an under 10-second startup. The other one is in some jurisdictions, and sometimes the AHJ may have an issue with respect to the, I'm going to say the reliability of the natural gas supply. So I know in Texas, if you want to have a backup generator for life safety that's natural gas and meets the 10-second, they still require that you have a dual fuel with on-site storage of some kind. Now, I find that really interesting because the United States military commissioned Lincoln Labs, MIT's Lincoln Labs, to say, hey, what is the best fuel we should be using for reliability in our military bases? And it came back overwhelmingly that the best choice is natural gas. It's much more reliable, not only because it's cleaner and there's less problems like biodiesel and things like that, but it's more reliable to get delivered, because if there was a natural disaster or something, what we have found is that it's sometimes very, very difficult to get diesel delivered, and you run out if you don't have enough. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your questions.
Thank you very much.
If you had any other questions or something, or want any follow-up, we will send out something. Our contact information's there. Would be happy to answer any questions you set. Pat, thanks again. Really appreciate you taking the time. And everybody, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.